All right, everybody, welcome back to a video. Here I have why 10 million men have given up on work. Full video is going to be in the description. Let's go ahead and get into it.
4 years ago, America and the rest of the world saw its most intense spike in unemployment in recorded history. In today's news cycle, that is ancient history. But what isn't ignored is what has been left behind. There are now over 10 million people, mostly men in America, who are not working, not studying, not retired, and not institutionalized.
And I'm willing to bet the reason why they're not doing any of those things is because more and more men are realizing that it isn't worth it.
They are just doing nothing. COVID accelerated this trend, but it's been going on for decades. Since the 1960s, about 0.1% of American men have given up on work to never come back every single month. So why are so many people giving up so consistently? And more importantly, how are these people surviving without a job in this economy?
In October, Mississippi's labor force participation rate was nearly 54%, while the national rate was over 62%.
How many jobs on these two websites?
It's been over 1,000 combined.
They're not working and they're not looking for a job, and those are the folks who we have to get into the labor market.
Why aren't some of
Now, what I want you to do, not you guys, what I want them to do is I want you to take the number of jobs that are missing employees, and then take the total amount they're getting paid every year, and then take the normal expenses, how much it costs to have an apartment, how much it costs to have insurance, how much it costs to have a house, how much it costs to feed yourself. And I want you to compare those things. And I can guarantee you that your expenses is going to be way more than the amount that these jobs are paying. And a lot of guys are saying, why would I do 40, 50, 60 hours a week just to barely put my head above water?
Americans getting back to work? It's the million-dollar question.
There are a lot of reasons why someone might not participate in the labor force. They might have retired, they might be still studying for qualifications, there might be people who are too sick to work, stay-at-home spouses, members of the military who are clearly working but don't officially count as part of the labor force, and then of course there are just really rich people who don't need to work to maintain their lifestyle. These groups have always existed, but there is a new group growing alongside them, which are people who have just given up. The fastest growing group of these labor force dropouts have been men between the ages of 25 and 55. Men in this age range would typically be in the prime of their careers, but more and more of them are not working at all. Now, some of this can simply be explained by the fact that more women have entered the workforce. In fact, up until 2008, women were entering the workforce almost as quickly as men were leaving it. Some men just took on domestic roles as stay-at-home husbands while their wives or partners focus on their careers instead. According to Pew Research, young women are now earning significantly more than young men in most major cities in America. Young women are also graduating college at higher rates than men. So it makes sense that a growing group of men are tossing aside typical gender roles and doing work that doesn't get counted as typical employment.
And see, that's where it's like, I'm raising an eyebrow, right? Because if we look at that dynamic, what I'm assuming what he's trying to say is that it used to be men go to work, women stay at home, did domestic work. And now all of a sudden it's starting to switch. That would make sense if that's how women operated. Men operate that way. We're like, oh yeah, okay, you can stay at home and do domestic work. Women, that doesn't fly. You make no money. She's the breadwinner. And every time she comes home and she's submitting to you, come on now. That's not the women we've been seeing. So I would love to see the numbers of domestic relationships where the woman is the pure breadwinner and the guy is doing the stay-at-home dad domestic work. I can guarantee it's going to be a lot lower than its counterpart.
If this were the whole story, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with this. But let's be honest. Having a stay-at-home parent, no matter what gender they are, is a luxury that most people simply cannot afford in the modern age, especially young people who are the fastest growing group of labor force dropouts. There is something more going on here. Nicholas Eberstadt is a political economist who published the book Men Without Work, which tracked the trend of working-age men simply giving up on work and largely removing themselves from society in the process. His book, which was first published in 2016, lines up perfectly with a 2022 study on the issue conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, which found that men without a college degree in particular were dropping out of work because their earnings power was significantly lower than their peers who did have a 4-year degree. That's not unusual because college-educated
Earning power was lower, expenses were just as high, if not higher.
People should
Why do they keep that? Why they skip that? They're making it seem like, oh, he's not earning, so he's just going to leave. Let's talk about those expenses.
expect to earn more than non-college educated workers on average. But the finding found that the gap between the two earn more than non-college educated not unusual, because college educated people should expect to earn more than non-college educated workers on average. But
and that's another thing. If we're being, let's be honest, right? I've done both blue collar and I've done white collar work. Blue collar work way harder. It's not even a debate. There's not even a question. Anybody who's ever worked blue collar work, real blue collar work, and you've worked white collar work, it's not even a question. But somehow the people who are doing not the strenuous labor is getting paid more than the people who are doing the blue collar stuff. And again, most people like to say, oh, well, it's because it's in relation to the value that you have to the market. You're telling me that blue collar jobs are less valuable than white collar jobs? In what world do you live in? And what infrastructure do you rely upon? You know what I mean? So it's like, let's talk about that. Why aren't we having those conversations?
Finding found that the gap between the two groups had widened significantly, especially amongst college-educated versus non-college educated men. Now, this was particularly surprising to the researchers because it would actually make more sense that higher income workers would drop out of the labor force, because if they are earning a lot of money, they have a better chance of marrying a higher earning spouse or just saving up more money for an early retirement. Instead, they found the opposite. The group that earned less were more likely to drop out of work. And yes, before you ask, the study did account for the fact that people not working won't be making an income, so they would automatically be in the non-working low-income group. Now, since men are now overrepresented in non-college graduates, they were the largest group of people giving up on work. But even though it's tempting to make this an entirely gender-specific issue, and to be honest, it would make for a more engaging YouTube video, there are some bigger forces at play here. The reason that people with lower incomes were dropping out was simply because they had less to lose and more to gain. Most unskilled jobs cannot buy you a comfortable lifestyle basically anywhere in America anymore. And as more people tie their identity and social status to their work and income, it's become much harder to accept unglamorous service positions. If you were given two options, honestly consider which one you would choose. You could scrape by working a few minimum wage jobs where you are on your feet dealing with customers and managers all day. A job where you are unlikely to advance too far without a degree, and you won't have much time or energy left at the end of the day to pursue side projects. You might also be working a job that you aren't exactly proud to share with your friends, family, or romantic interests. The other option is that you could scrape by on whatever government programs or family support you could find. Maybe work on some side projects in your spare time, or just fill your day with low-cost recreation like playing video games. I would like to think I appreciate the value of a hard day's work, but I have always had the luxury of a prestigious career and successful business. Given these specific options, how would you choose to spend your day?
And that's exactly what I said earlier. They're realizing that it's not worth it. You're really think about this, right? So I think that he's saying it, but he's not really saying it. The fact that is if you're working, like he said, 5 guys, let's say you have 2 jobs, 5 guys in a gas station, right? And you're barely keeping above water. We got to understand, we're talking about men here. Men don't do things strictly for money. It may seem like that on the surface, but under it, they're doing it for a lot of reasons, as far as sacrificing themselves for what they believe in, right? So they want to be a part of it. They're doing it for their dating options. They're doing it for fulfillment, right? It all has to do with dating, community, sacrifice for the things that you love and you care about. Well, what has happened over the past, the increasing number of things that we're realizing that, wait a minute, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it, because what we've seen in the last decade is that you can be this hard worker guy, 5 guys working at the gas station, and let's say you're going out into the dating world. What we've seen with our own eyes is guys who are deadbeats, guys who don't have a job, is doing better than you in the job market. And so it's like, most guys are like, okay, well, if dating is out, then you look at, okay, I'm sacrificing myself for my country. Well, then you're starting to realize that how many policies and how many people are actually looking down on you and allowing things to slide that is at your detriment. And you're like, what am I sacrificing myself for these people for? So then you take that away. And so again, you go back into, it's like, you're trying to sacrifice yourself for your community. And it's like, what community? Most guys' community is online. It's online with other people who think like them, or they're in their gaming community. And so let me get this straight. You want me to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, sacrificing for people who could give a crap about me. And on top of that, my dating options are basically non-existent, serious dating options now, versus I look over to the guy who's a deadbeat, who's not working, who's probably cheating the system or doing anything, and he's crushing it socially. Yeah, okay. Convince him to keep doing that, but not spend his time doing whatever he wants, if that's playing video games. Good luck.
If you are brave enough, go ahead and share it in the comments below, so people on the internet can call you a bootlicker or a lazy zoomer respectively. Now, the second option also has the advantage that if someone asks you what you do for work, you can just tell them that you are working on a new business or taking some time off. The Fed study found that this was one of the biggest reasons people didn't want to take on jobs that they thought were beneath them. Now, no matter what side of the fence you are on, this issue
and notice how the highest reason of why people weren't going is because of the pay.
Affects us all. These millions of people are out of work at the same time as we have major issues with worker shortages in our most important industries. And this trend is only going to get worse unless something changes. So it's time to learn how money works to find out how these people are surviving without work and what it means for the rest of the workforce if they never come back. Apart from a few early retirees that made a lot of money at a young age, most of the people who are not working and are not looking for work are living extremely basic lives. Eberstadt's research went beyond the broader demographic studies and focused a lot on trying to figure out what these people were actually doing with their time. Now, the next few minutes are going to contain some hard-to-swallow pills, and even though Eberstadt is sometimes a bit direct with the way he lays out the facts, his research and his recommendations address some of the most important issues in our society. He found through national surveys that the average man not in work or looking for work was basically doing what you might expect. They were sitting at home, spending a majority of time behind a screen. Most of them contribute very little to looking after other members of a household, and they were underrepresented in other civic activities like volunteering, even though they had more free time than their peers who worked or studied. He also poked holes in the idea that a lot of these men had just become stay-at-home spouses taking care of chores to support their working partner, a role that was, in the past, typically performed by women. Unfortunately, according to the federal survey data he collated, the average labor force dropout spent an equal amount of time on household care as the average employed woman, and 5 minutes less per day than the average unemployed man, who would theoretically be spending at least some of their time looking for a new job. What they were spending their time on was leisure activities and sleeping. The average person who had dropped out of the labor force was also far less likely to have children or a partner, and Eberstadt theorized that there were two reasons for this. The first reason was that children, dating, and a family life are expensive commitments that people trying to get by without a job just simply wouldn't be able to afford. The second reason was that people with a family to support were inherently more motivated to go out and provide, even if it meant working a job that a single person wouldn't. Of course, this is a large sample size, and there are plenty of people.
And again, this is the reason why you have to be very careful when you're listening to the stats and statistics guys, because again, bro, what about that third reason, which is they have no options? That's kind of a huge part socially that they just left out. Listen, if I'm unemployed, right, or if I'm either unemployed or I'm working at a dead-end job, either a gas station attendant, a fast food worker, a janitor, things of this nature, these guys respectively have the same data options. In fact, what we're seeing is that if you're good looking enough, then the unemployed guys are getting better results than the guys who are employed. And so a lot of guys are saying, why am I spending all this extra time on BS if I'm not getting anything out of it, when I could just at least do what I want if I'm going to get the same exact result?
People with children who don't work, and plenty of couples totally outside of the labor force as well. But even without these typical responsibilities, daily life is still very expensive. Government benefits for people out of work typically only extend to those people who are either actively seeking work or cannot work because of an illness or disability. The exact makeup of these assistance programs varies state to state. And of course, outside of America, different countries have different levels of social welfare. But America is where this trend has been most pronounced, and it's also where a bulk of the research on this trend has been done. So as anybody who has ever tried to apply for government welfare in America will tell you, the burden of proof to qualify for these payments can be exceptionally high, with the only real exception being COVID-era stimulus, where arguably the burden of proof for payments was too low. Saying you need unemployment payments because you would prefer to stay at home all day vaping and playing Fortnite isn't going to fly with Uncle Sam. What Eberstadt did find, though, was that it had become much easier for people to qualify for disability payments, which in most circumstances do not require recipients to be actively looking for work to maintain their payments. In his own book, he highlights how difficult it was to find consistent data on all of the government programs that might be available to these people. And of course, needlessly pointing the finger at assistance to some of society's most vulnerable people is not the point here. What is, though, is that according to data from the Department of Social Security, annual disability insurance payments have outpaced all other major programs. They provide the data as a table, but here is a nice visual line chart. Dr. Dwight R. Lee, an economist, also proposed that a major element that Eberstadt overlooked was that a lot of these men were working. They were just doing it in the underground economy, which was estimated to be contributing about $2 trillion, or about 12% of US GDP. This could include these people doing anything from working informal cash jobs to skirt tax and minimum wage laws to outright illegal operations like shoplifting or selling drugs. So the work of these researchers paints an image.
Or even doing one-off jobs, right? Have you guys seen these different apps where you could work a shift? You don't have to be employed with that company, but you could pick different shifts. You guys seen that? There's things like Uber, things like DoorDash, things like Uber Eats. Again, why would I spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week at a job that is looked down upon on society and pays like garbage when I can just spend 20 to 30 hours a week on these these gig economy apps and get all of my expenses paid? What's the difference? Because there is no moving up, there is no looking more attractive in the eyes of the opposite sex. It's the same. And so which one are you going to pick? The one where you're working extra hard and you're getting less respect, or the one where you're working less and you're able to do more what you want with the same level of respect?
An image of this growing group of individuals mooching off friends, family, and the government, while wasting their days away playing video games or being an overall burden on society. It's not exactly flattering, but to be fair, there are certainly people living these lives, and with nationwide or even global demographic trends like this, broad strokes need to be made. The researchers studying this trend are actually highly sympathetic to the situation of these people, and they seem motivated to actually fix the cause of these problems. I will of course be leaving a link to the full book in the video description.
They always say that, but let's be honest. No, they're not.
If you want to read it yourself, as well as some great interviews these men have done that lets them articulate their grim feelings in a way that's a bit more human. The reality is that I can personally see if just a few things went differently in my own life, I could have easily fallen into the same comfortable trap. Most of you watching could have too, whether you realize it or not. But this still doesn't answer the most important question. Why is this becoming more common? Most people, if given the choice, would prefer a nice stable job with an income that could provide a standard of living beyond basic survival. But yet, more and more people are dropping out of even trying to look for a job every single year. There is unfortunately no single answer as to why people are giving up, but there are some contributing factors. Firstly, competition for good prestigious jobs have become far more fierce, while pay for basic jobs has not kept up with living costs. Technology has made it much easier to isolate oneself from the rest of the world, and there are other broader social issues like the opioid epidemic that at the very least have not helped this trend. One of the most damaging factors has been the insidious myth of the skills shortage, which has led to an economy where millions of people don't have a job, but there are millions of jobs that don't have people to fill them. I am going to be writing an article about how the idea of a skills shortage has been used to undermine the traditional career path of millions of Americans over on my free email newsletter linked in the video description. Something like the rise and fall of the tech bro is a clear demonstration that even the most talented and driven workers have less control over their careers than they might like to admit. So if you like this video, check out that one next to keep on learning how money works.
And so that's going to be that video. But listen, man, I think that, like I said it before, it's not worth it. A lot of guys are realizing that it's not worth it. It's like, and here's the thing, right? You might start off very optimistic when you're entering this job force, and you may spend 1, 2, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years putting in all this work just to get this one position or a position that pays well. And then when you're in that position, you realize that I did all of that for this and it's not worth it. And so if you have to end up leaving or quitting because you refuse to stay there because of how much you invested, then it's like the motivation to want to get up and try it again is diminished because of that long negative reinforcement that has been on you. And again, that's just the money side. We're not talking about the dating aspect. We're not talking about the community aspect. We're not talking about all the things that men got up and did these things for. We're not talking about that, because when we realize that that's not worth it either, all these things are crumbling. You're gonna have more and more and more men that says, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. Right? What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. And with that, I'll see y'all in the next one.